I knew something was off the minute I saw the orange cones at the end of my driveway. Not just cones, metal barricades too. And a shiny new sign, zip tied to the post like a badge of arrogance. Private access, HOA use only. I slammed my truck door and stomped toward it, fists clenched. My name's Xander Jett, and I've lived on this ranch for over 15 years. It's 5 acres, tucked just outside of the suburban creep that's been swallowing up everything green in this county. I paid for the land, I built the house, and I damn well cleared that winding gravel driveway myself. Now some wannabe emperor from the HOA thought they could block it. I didn't even live inside the HOA boundaries, but that didn't stop them from trying to bully me. They'd been eyeing my property for months, ever since they finished building that new subdivision on the other end of the hill. Turns out my long driveway was the easiest shortcut for their golf carts and landscaping trucks to avoid the main road. I caught them using it once, maybe 6 weeks ago. I told them to knock it off. They didn't. And now this, Xander, a sugary voice called behind me. I turned and saw her, Velma Norwick, HOA president and queen dictator of the Hazelwood Pines community. Mid-50s, platinum blonde hair that bounced like it had its own budget and lipstick that matched the fury I felt boiling in my gut. "You've got a lot of nerve," I said. She gave a little laugh, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Now, let's not be dramatic. We simply needed to reroute traffic for safety. Your driveway is the only access point that makes logistical sense for our maintenance vehicles. You mean the shortcut you've been trespassing on? She waved her hand like I'd just accused her of jaywalking. Technically, it's a utility easement. No, it's not. There's no recorded easement on my land. Well, we're working on that, she said with a smile that made me want to break something. In the meantime, we've closed off the driveway for everyone's benefit. You can use the old service road on the north side. That road hadn't been used in years and washed out every time it rained. I stepped closer. Move the barricades, now. Velma didn't flinch. If you remove them, we will fine you. And if you damage them, we'll pursue property destruction charges. That was her game, intimidation, bluster. The HOA had money and lawyers. I was just a guy with a ranch, so I nodded, didn't say another word, just turned, walked back to my truck and drove around the long way home. That night I went through my old files. Plat maps, deed copies, drone footage from last summer. Everything that proved that road was mine, top to bottom. No easements, no shared access, just clear legal ownership. But I also knew HOA types like Velma didn't play fair. She'd stall. File fake paperwork. Buy time while her little army kept tearing up my land, so I came up with a better plan. The next morning, while the subdivision was still waking up to their HOA-approved coffee and newsletter emails, I drove out to the hardware store and picked up exactly what I needed. Spike strips, not the kind you see in movies. These were discreet, low-profile, retractable, and designed for private property. Perfectly legal as long as you posted a warning sign. I installed the whole setup just inside the tree line where their shortcut veered off the pavement and onto my gravel. Then I added a small sign. Warning, private drive, tire damage possible, and I waited. Didn't take long. By midday, I was sitting on the porch with a cup of black coffee watching the treetops sway. A hawk circled overhead. I couldn't hear tires yet, but I knew they were coming. They always did around the same time. Contractors, landscapers, and HOA board members in their shiny SUVs, all using what they called alternate routing. I didn't need to wait long. The crunch of gravel came first, followed by the low hum of a diesel engine straining uphill. A white F-250 rounded the bend, hauling a flatbed trailer stacked with mulch. I didn't know the driver, but I recognized the HOA logo plastered on the side. Hazelwood Pines Maintenance Division. He didn't slow down. He didn't even glance at the sign. I heard it before I saw it. A loud pop, then another. The truck jerked to a halt, listing hard to the left. The driver jumped out, arms flailing. He knelt beside the front tire, then the rear. His voice carried clear as a bell. "You've got to be kidding me." Both, he was still pacing when a black Jeep pulled in behind him. From the open window, a woman leaned out and shouted, "What happened?" "Spikes. There are spikes in the road." The woman threw the door open and stormed toward him. It was Velma's vice president, Denise Garrison. She had the permanent scowl of someone who measured her self-worth in parking citations and HOA newsletters. "You didn't see the sign," I called down from my porch. She turned sharply. "What sign?" I pointed. "Right there, private drive." "Tire damage possible, you're on my land. You can't do this," she snapped. "This is a designated access." "No, it's not," I said, "and I've got the property survey and title to prove it." "You're trespassing. You're interfering with municipal operations." "Funny," I said, standing now, "because last I checked, the Hazelwood HOA isn't a government agency. You're a private entity using private property without consent." The driver kicked at the gravel. "What the hell am I supposed to do? I've got a whole day of deliveries." "Call a tow," I said, "and next time use the main road." They spent the next 40 minutes arguing with each other, then calling a tow truck, which couldn't reach them without backing up the whole hill. Several more HOA vehicles showed up, including a cargo van that nearly rear-ended the flatbed. I watched it all unfold with the satisfaction of a man who'd been pushed too far and finally pushed back, but I knew it wouldn't stop there. Sure enough, the next day a uniformed deputy showed up at my gate. "Morning," he said, eyeing the camera mounted on the corner post. "You Xander Jet, that's me. I got a complaint from the Hazelwood Pines Homeowners Association. Said you installed tire spikes on an easement road." I handed him a manila folder. "Here's the deed, the boundary maps, and the drone footage from last week. That road's entirely on my land. No easement. No shared access." He flipped through the papers, eyebrows lifting as he scanned the surveyor's stamp. "They also said you failed to post warning signs." "Got one right at the entrance," I said. 2-inch letters, reflective paint mounted at eye level. "Took photos too," he nodded slowly. "Looks like you covered your bases. Mind if I go take a look?" "Go ahead, I'll walk with you." We strolled down to the spike strip, which was retracted now. The deputy crouched beside it, inspecting the mechanism. "Retractable, huh? Only deploys if the sensor picks up unauthorized vehicles. Registered plates from my household don't trigger it." He gave a low whistle. "That's advanced," I shrugged. "I worked avionics for 20 years, built this setup myself." He looked impressed. "Well, far as I can tell, you're within your rights." "I'll file the report, but I wouldn't worry." "Appreciate it." Before he left, he added, "You might want to keep your cameras rolling. This kind of thing doesn't usually stop with just one visit." He wasn't wrong. 2 nights later, I caught movement on the feed from my east gate. 3 figures in dark hoodies, no headlights, creeping in with bolt cutters. They didn't make it past the second motion sensor before the floodlights snapped on, and a pre-recorded warning blasted from the speaker. "This property is under 24-hour surveillance. Trespassers will be prosecuted." They bolted. The next morning, I handed the footage to the sheriff's department. By the end of the week, Hazelwood Pines was down 3 board members. Turns out, the attempted sabotage had been organized by Velma's inner circle. Denise was caught on camera carrying the bolt cutters. The third figure was a landscaping contractor who confessed once he saw the footage, but Velma, she denied everything. "I had no knowledge of any unauthorized activity," she told the deputy. "We do not condone vigilantism." The sheriff's office didn't buy it. They subpoenaed HOA emails and found a chain where Velma ordered alternative solutions to remove the illegal barrier. Her exact words, "Make it disappear, quietly." That's when it got serious. The county prosecutor filed charges: conspiracy to commit trespassing, attempted property damage, and obstruction of justice. The HOA board lawyered up fast, but it was too late to contain the damage. Word spread through Hazelwood Pines like wildfire. Homeowners started showing up at city council meetings, demanding audits. Turns out, Velma had been diverting funds, charging special access fees and pocketing kickbacks from contractors who used my road. Once that came to light, the rest of her house of cards collapsed. A group of residents formed an independent committee and hired a forensic accountant. The final report was damning. Nearly $78,000 in unaccounted expenses, unauthorized permits, and hush payments to construction crews. Velmer resigned under pressure. The HOA tried to offer me a settlement $5,000 to remove the spike strip and sign a mutual cooperation agreement. I laughed in their lawyer's face. I'm not interested in deals. I want a formal apology in writing and a recorded acknowledgement that my property is off limits. Permanently, he hesitated. That could open them up to liability. Good, I said. That's the point. 2 weeks later, I got my letter, signed by the interim board president and notarized. They agreed to install permanent signage at the subdivision exit, warning residents that the gravel road was private and not to be used under any circumstances. They also agreed to pay for the tow truck damages from the landscaping contractor just to avoid a civil suit. I framed the letter and hung it right above the spike strip control panel in my garage. Funny thing is, after all the smoke cleared, I started getting visits from folks in Hazelwood Pines. Not board members, regular people. A retired couple brought me a pie. A young guy from down the hill asked if I'd help him set up cameras after his HOA tried to fine him for having a flagpole. Turns out, once the fear broke, people started waking up. Velma had ruled with intimidation. But once her fangs were pulled, the whole neighborhood realized they didn't have to live under her thumb. And me, I got my land back. The road stayed quiet. No more golf carts, no more leaf blowers. Just the sound of wind in the trees and tires on gravel mine. The first few weeks after Velma's resignation, I figured things might finally settle. The shortcut traffic had stopped cold, and I'd even gone a full 5 days without seeing anyone from Hazelwood Pines poking around my property line. But peace doesn't last long when you've humiliated the kind of people who see power as a birthright. It started small, harmless, even. A certified letter from the HOA's new interim board, requesting cooperative dialogue over shared water runoff concerns. Then came a second letter, this one marked urgent, claiming that my tree line was encroaching on a community visibility corridor that didn't exist on any map. I didn't respond to either. I knew what they were doing, testing the waters, looking for a new angle to re-establish control. But what I didn't expect was how far they were willing to go when the soft tactics failed. One Thursday morning, I got a call from the county assessor's office. The clerk on the line sounded uncomfortable, like he was reading from a script he didn't write. Mr. Jett. We received a request to reassess your property for commercial usage. Are you operating a business out of your home? My jaw tightened. No, I'm not. Well. The request included photographs and a statement alleging that you're running an unlicensed security installation company from the premises. I paused. Let me guess the complaint came from Hazelwood Pines, he hesitated. I'm not supposed to say, but yes, it came from a board member. We're required to follow up when we get those. I thanked him and hung up, already pacing by the time I tossed the phone on the table. They were trying to paint me as a rogue operator, someone using his land for profit without permits. That could trigger zoning issues, inspections, even fines. But I'd lived clean. I knew the laws. I didn't sell anything, didn't advertise, and every tool I'd installed was on my own property for personal use. Still, they weren't aiming to win in court. They were trying to bury me in bureaucracy. I spent the next 2 days filing a response with the assessor's office and submitting a formal complaint of my own. But the real fight started when I got a call from a friend inside the county records department, Karen Maddox. We'd gone to high school together, and she still owed me for fixing her dad's wiring when I was an apprentice. Xander, she said, voice low, you need to come down here in person. I can't talk over the phone. I grabbed my keys and was there in 20 minutes. She met me in a side office, door shut, blinds down. They filed a boundary amendment, she said, sliding a manila folder across the desk. 3 parcels your ranch included redesignated as transitional zoning buffer. I flipped through the paperwork. It was stamped, signed, and filed under the name of a new HOA committee I'd never heard of. Hazelwood Pines Planning and Beautification Oversight. I looked up. This isn't legal, Karen nodded. That's what I said. But they submitted a forged petition claiming unanimous consent from affected landowners. Your name's on it. I stared at the signature. It was mine or close to it. A cheap copy from an old permit application, traced and scanned. They're trying to reclassify my land without my consent, I said, voice flat. Karen leaned in. They already did. It's on record. But if you challenge it fast, you can force a hearing before it takes effect. I didn't waste a second. I filed the challenge that afternoon. But I knew a hearing wouldn't be enough. This wasn't just about land now. It was fraud, plain and simple. Forging a legal document, that crossed a line. I drove straight to the sheriff's office and asked to speak with a detective. I brought the folder, Karen's affidavit, and a copy of my actual signature for comparison. The detective's name was Rameyer's quiet guy, sharp eyes, and the kind of patience that made you nervous. You're saying someone forged your signature to alter county zoning, he said after reviewing the documents. Not just someone. The HOA. They submitted it as part of a fake committee. He didn't blink. That's a felony. He made copies of everything and promised to open a formal investigation. I left his office with a case number and a sense of cold satisfaction. The HOA hadn't just overplayed their hand, they'd lit it on fire in front of a lawman. The next few days were a blur. Investigators interviewed Karen, then pulled the HOA's filing history. They found discrepancies, timestamp edits, mismatched signatories, and 2 board members who couldn't explain how their names ended up on procedural documents they'd never seen. Then came the search warrant. The sheriff's department raided the HOA's office, an upscale rental suite next to a yoga studio on a rainy Tuesday morning. News traveled fast. By noon, the parking lot was crawling with local reporters, and one of the deputies confirmed they'd seized laptops, printed emails, and a portable hard drive labeled board docs. I watched the coverage from my porch, sipping coffee as the rain fell across the gravel. The fallout was brutal. Velma, though no longer president, was named in multiple emails pushing for strategic zoning shifts to curtail non-compliant landowners. Denise, already disgraced, was found to have downloaded a signature generator, something she'd used to forge not just my name but 3 others. The entire board was suspended pending criminal proceedings. The county prosecutor announced formal charges: document forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and falsification of public records. It made the local paper's front page for 2 weeks straight, but what really turned the screw? The civil suit. Once the criminal charges were filed, I retained an attorney. A real bulldog named Lel Keegan who'd made a name suing overreach bureaucracies and corrupt local governments. He filed a civil action against the HOA and the board members personally. Damages for defamation, property interference, and punitive compensation for the forged documentation. Lyle didn't pull punches. He subpoenaed internal communications, unearthed financial documents, and built a case so airtight that the HOA's insurance provider refused to cover the board's legal fees. The defendants were on their own, and their lawyers knew it. During deposition, Velma finally cracked. She admitted under oath that she'd authorized the submission of the boundary amendment without verifying signatures. She blamed procedural misunderstandings and overzealous delegation, but the damage was done. We settled the civil case out of court for a figure I'm not legally allowed to mention, but let's just say I could have built a second ranch and stocked it with purebred cattle. I used part of it to pave the old service road they'd told me to use months ago, the one they said was better access. I paved it all the way to a steel gate with a sign that read, "Private. No through traffic, property under video surveillance. Trespassers will be prosecuted." The rest went into a community defense fund. Because here's the thing. Hazelwood Pines wasn't the only HOA in this county playing dirty, and once people saw what I'd done, what was possible when you stood your ground, they started coming forward. A nurse whose HOA fined her for parking her shift vehicle too close to her own garage. A veteran whose flag was torn down twice before he caught the board president's nephew on camera. The fund helped them fight back, paid for legal consults, filings, and court fees. It became a network, a movement. I never set out to be a symbol. I just wanted my land left alone. But when you dig your boots in and refuse to move, sometimes that's enough to shift the ground under everyone else too. The autumn wind carried the dry scent of pine and diesel as I watched a county maintenance crew dig a trench along the western edge of my property. Thick cables, bundled and tagged, were being laid for a new fiber line, part of a rural infrastructure grant I'd applied for the year before. Funny how things came full circle. The same stretch of land the Hazelwood Pines Board had tried to steal was now being upgraded legally, transparently, and entirely under my name. I hadn't seen Velma Norwick in person since her deposition, but her name came up again this time from an unexpected source. "Mr. Jett," said the man in the dark gray suit, offering a business card that bore the county seal and a Department of Public Integrity watermark. "I'm Investigator Cole. We're conducting a parallel inquiry related to financial misconduct. Your civil case unearthed some interesting threads." We stood in my workshop, which still smelled faintly of solder and cedar. Cole didn't waste time on small talk. Our office received a tip regarding property development kickbacks, specifically under-the-table payments routed through a third-party landscaping firm. That firm's owner mentioned you during a sealed testimony. I raised an eyebrow. Me, only in context. Apparently, your refusal to allow HOA access triggered an emergency meeting between board members and the developer of Hazelwood Pines Phase Roman II. That's when they allegedly began funneling money through shell companies to secure alternate routes, or force existing ones. I folded my arms. You're saying they were bribing inspectors? And at least one zoning official, Cole replied. We've already served warrants. There's a good chance criminal conspiracy and racketeering charges will be filed before the end of the year. I didn't say anything at first, a rare moment for me. Then I reached into a drawer and pulled out a small hard drive. This has 6 months of gate cam footage, audio logs from the intercom feeds, and stills from the motion traps by the old trailhead. I hadn't turned it in yet because I didn't know what was relevant. Cole took it carefully, nodding. We'll process it. If anything corroborates our timeline, we'll add it to the prosecutorial package. That evening, I sat on the porch and watched the sun dip behind the hills. Coyotes called in the distance, and somewhere beyond the ridge, I heard a generator kick on. Life was quieter now, but not still. There was a difference. 3 days later, a deputy in plainclothes knocked on my door just after breakfast. He carried a sealed envelope and a body cam clipped to his collar. Xander Jett, I nodded. You've been identified as a victim in an ongoing criminal investigation. This is your official notification of grand jury proceedings. You may be contacted to testify. He handed over the envelope, tapped twice on the railing, and left without another word. Inside the envelope was a subpoena and a summary of charges being brought against 6 individuals, 3 from the HOA board, 1 developer, and 2 county employees. Velma Norwick's name was at the top of the list. The charges included conspiracy to defraud, bribery of public officials, falsification of legal documents, and misuse of public funds. The grand jury process took weeks. I testified once, answering direct questions about the forged boundary petition, the attempts to rezone my land, and the sabotage attempt that had been caught on my cameras. The lead prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Dorsey, listened carefully, then asked one question that hadn't come up before. Did Miss Norwick or any board member ever offer you a direct incentive to relinquish your property rights? I paused. She offered what she called a mutual agreement clause, $5,000 in exchange for permanent access. And how did she word the offer? She said the HOA would consider it a sign of goodwill and that anything less might be interpreted as non-cooperation. Dorsey nodded once and wrote something down. "Thank you, Mr. Jett." The grand jury returned indictments on all 6 individuals. 2 pled guilty immediately. Velma fought it hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. Between the forged signatures, misappropriated HOA funds, and the internal communications subpoenaed during my civil suit, she didn't have much ground left to stand on. The trial lasted 10 days. I attended the final sentencing hearing, seated quietly in the back row, watching as Velma stood before the judge. Her hair no longer bounced and the lipstick was gone. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of her own schemes had finally settled onto her shoulders. The judge, an older man with a reputation for cutting through theatrics, read the charges aloud, and then the sentence. Velma was given 4 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 18 months. The 2 county officials received suspended sentences and were permanently barred from holding public office. The developer was fined heavily and stripped of all active permits in the county. The remaining board members were banned from serving in any housing association leadership capacity for a minimum of 10 years. When it was over, I left through the side exit. Outside the courthouse, a few local reporters lingered, but none approached me. I appreciated that. I wasn't interested in becoming some kind of folk hero. I just wanted to go home. That night, a convoy of trucks pulled into my driveway, neighbors, friends, even a few folks from Hazelwood Pines carrying toolboxes, seed packets, and lumber. They weren't there to gawk, they were there to help. We spent the next day building a proper community garden along the southern fence line, right where the HOA had once tried to expand their green belt without asking. We planted tomatoes, peppers, and a row of late-season squash. Someone brought a bench made from reclaimed oak, and an old veteran named Harris installed a solar panel to power the irrigation timer. No permits, no forms, just people doing right by each other. As the sun sank low and the garden was finally watered, I caught sight of something new on my property line. A small wooden post hand-carved with a plaque that read, "This land stands as proof, power doesn't make you right, standing your ground does." I didn't ask who made it, didn't need to. Weeks passed. The HOA was dissolved and replaced by a voluntary neighborhood council. No dues, no fines, just quarterly potlucks and a shared spreadsheet for lawnmower borrowing. The remaining Hazelwood Pines residents voted to dissolve the restrictive covenants entirely, and for the first time in years, people started repainting their homes, building front porch swings, and planting whatever they damn well pleased. As for me, I kept my cameras up not because I expected trouble, but because they reminded me of what I'd learned. That when you know the ground you stand on, when you've walked every inch of it, cleared it, built on it, defended it, you don't let anyone take it from you. Not with threats. Not with fake documents. Not with zip-tied signs or closed-door deals. That gravel driveway, the one they tried to claim, it's still there, still private. But now there's a new addition at the entrance, a small wooden sign hung beneath the warning placard. It reads simply, "Welcome if you come with respect."